We're going to begin this morning in Memphis with new developments in the investigation into the death of Tyre Nichols. And this morning, that city is on edge.
5 now fired Memphis police officers are now facing second-degree murder charges in connection to Nichols' alleged killing. Those officers, Justin Smith, Emmett Martin, Desmond Mills Jr., Demetrius Haley, and Tadarius Bean. Authorities say the men were all involved in a traffic stop that led to Nichols' death. Shelby County District Attorney Steve Mulroy announced the charges yesterday at a news conference. He was joined by the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation.
While each of the 5 individuals played a different role in the incident in question, the actions of all of them resulted in the death of Tyre Nichols, and they are all responsible.
Nichols' family was shown the footage of the January 7th traffic stop earlier this week. They say it shows officers beating the 29-year-old for 3 minutes. Their legal team is comparing it to the 1990s police beating of Rodney King in Los Angeles. Authorities say Nichols died from his injuries 3 days later. Attorneys for 2 of the police officers, Martin and Mills, are also speaking out. They're calling for a fair trial for their clients. They say they intend to plead not guilty.
I would just caution the public to reserve judgment. Know that there's always more to the story.
No one out there that night intended for Tyre Nichols to die. No one. That's shocking. That's shocking to the officers.
Still, the charges won't erase the pain felt across Memphis and across the country over Nichols' death. More than 300 people gathered last night for a candlelight vigil in Nichols' memory. This as Memphis authorities prepare to release the footage from the traffic stop. That'll be released later today. Memphis Police Chief C.J. Davis says she expects citizens to be outraged. Nichols' mother is calling for peaceful protests. NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos is here to help break down the investigation for us. We're going to talk with him in a moment, but we're going to start with the latest on the investigation with NBC News correspondent Sam Brock, who's in Memphis. We're also joined by Mark Claxton, a retired NYPD detective and director of the Black Law Enforcement Alliance. Sam, let's start with you. We don't have many details right now about this traffic stop, but what has the district attorney revealed so far?
Right. So the district attorney, Joe, discussed the fact that we are in the midst right now of an inhumane series of consequential actions. Videotape that captured what he described as something that should never happen to another human being. In fact, those are the same words from the city's police chief, C.J. Davis, as well. And that, of course, that indictments followed from that. 5 second-degree murder charges, one for each of the 5 police officers who were involved in this seizure. And as you mentioned, the district attorney there, Mr. Mulroy, said that they all played a role. They didn't have the exact same reaction, but all of them, in his words, led to the death of a 29-year-old man who was stopped for a traffic violation. Speaking with the president of the NAACP, he told me, when would a traffic violation lead to a death sentence? That's not how things are supposed to work in America. Now, Joe, bear with me for a second. Behind me is the Shelby County Jail. And for a period of time, 5 police officers were in there. Right now, 4 out of 5 of them, Joe, have bonded out. So clearly that may create some tension here in the city of Memphis. If there is one thing, though, that we know to be true, it's the fact that those murder charges came down prior to the video being released. Can you imagine what the environment would be like in Memphis if there were not charges against these particular officers, and you did see video that was so visceral and so painful, as has been described by authorities and the family members of Tyre Nichols who have already viewed it. Now, it is also telling that the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation that led this probe, they described, the director, how he would characterize this video in one word. Listen to what he said.
I'm shocked. I'm sickened by what I saw. And what we've learned through our extensive and thorough investigation. I've seen the video, and as D.A. Mulroy stated, you will too. In a word, it's absolutely appalling.
Joe, there is the potential that we could be seeing additional charges against other members of the Memphis Police Department. There are also EMTs involved, fire department members as well. So we'll see how wide this scope ultimately gets. But right now, the city of Memphis is on edge, waiting to see what this video will actually reveal.
Mark, Memphis Police Chief C.J. Davis released a video statement on social media. Let's go ahead and listen to that. We'll get your reaction.
This is not just a professional failing. This is a failing of basic humanity toward another individual. This incident was heinous, reckless, and inhumane.
What do you make of her statements there, Mark, and how this investigation has played out so far?
Chief Davis, Mr. Nichols are a large reason why the pace of this investigation has sped up significantly and outside of what is normal, what we normally expect with law enforcement investigations. So she's a well-respected law enforcement professional, well-respected nationally in the law enforcement community, super well respected within the Black law enforcement community, and her actions in many ways are the reasons why some of these steps, the arrest, were kind of rapid as opposed to what we're accustomed to.
Sam, this body camera footage is set to be released after 6 p.m. local time. How's the community reacting and really bracing for its release later today?
So as one woman who is an associate minister in this community described it to me, it's like preparing yourself for a car crash that you've already seen it, right? You know that it's happened, but you haven't felt the impact yet. That's how folks here are feeling, because they just know that they are going to be totally beside themselves to see this level of inhumanity and pain inflicted on another person. And so it's just a series of, as she said, metabolizing bits of information that they can understand in their mind, but how they absorb it in their hearts is a completely different matter. Here's what she told me.
We have compounded grief right now. There's a grief that's happening because Tyre's life was already taken. There's a grief that we're holding with this family, and then there's a anticipated grief that is mixed with rage and pain in advance for a video that should not exist, meaning it should never have happened.
So the video shouldn't exist because it never should have happened. And you're looking right now at a dynamic where the NAACP president told me, if this doesn't create some sort of national change, and we're talking about legislation at the congressional level that would establish a national standard of training for police officers. He said you can't have, say, 5,000 cities with 5,000 different potential guidelines for police officers. There needs to be something uniform, and there needs to be a database, he says, that tracks police misconduct, because oftentimes what you find are a small percentage of officers who commit infractions, and then they just move on to another agency after the fact. And Joe, that is relevant here in the sense that the one officer who is still behind bars, Demetrius Haley, was involved in a prison assault several years ago in which one of the people there ended up unconscious, and he ended up then moving on to the Memphis Police Department. So there's a lot of questions that are coming out of this, but this community right now bracing for the hours ahead.
Mark, do you agree with what the NCAA president told Sam about there needing to be a national database like this? I mean, I know that we have the Brady list that's available via public information request. And also I want to talk about these specialized units. It's our understanding that many of these officers, if not all of them, were involved in a so-called Scorpion unit. The police chief says that these specialized units will be under review. What might that look like?
That would look like additional supervision, perhaps dismantling of that particular unit. Oftentimes, law enforcement agencies will rename these type of units if they're found to be problematic, and oftentimes violating some constitutional law. So that's all window dressing, and I agree with the NAACP in regards to the need for police reform, comprehensive police reform. I think most importantly, what needs to happen is there needs to be a shifting from what we have understood to be the traditional policing model of run, catch them, lock them up, and throw away the key, and more towards a public safety model, which incorporates so many different disciplines, where you have some attention to the economic impact in communities, financial hardships, social issues that crop up, psychologists that deal with and address mental health issues, more of a comprehensive approach. And then also, finally, you have to stop police departments from being the main enforcers for some of these, the most simplest of offenses. Not every offense, not even a criminal act, not every offense needs police intervention. And we found that these car stops are high on the list of interactions that too often result in fatal encounters, specifically and especially for Black and brown people.
Mark Claxton and Sam Brock, thank you both for kicking us off this hour. We really appreciate your time.
For more on this, let's bring in NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalas. So, Danny, good morning. First of all, I saw you were nodding along to what Mark was saying there in terms of some of these traffic stops. Let's talk right now about this video and the anticipation of its release and what investigators are going to be looking for. I mean, they've already seen it, but what are you going to be looking for example, as somebody with a legal background?
Right. There's going to be apparently a number of different videos because there were a number of different body cams. But in addition, there are what they call pole cams. The city of Memphis uses a company, I believe it's called Sky Cop, but they install on poles, video cameras that are triggered sometimes by a gunshot or maybe movement, whatever the case may be. But reportedly, they caught this encounter. So you're going to get two different angles, at least, one from body cam and one from the pole cam. The reason that's significant is that sometimes body cam, it's amazing if it's high def for picking up furtive movements or maybe anything else that may be disputed during a car stop, but they can be jostled pretty easily if the police officers are wrestling with someone. That pole cam, assuming it caught the entire encounter, might give us even more perspective, even if it's removed maybe even by 50 yards or so.
So, Danny, yesterday we heard from two attorneys representing some of the officers. Let's listen a little more to what one of them had to say. We'll talk about it on the other side.
We obviously have started to think about potential defenses. We are getting to know our clients. Unfortunately, we've all over the last couple of years seen videos where there's police brutality involved. And so I would just caution the public to reserve judgment. You're going to feel things, you're going to experience emotions, but know that there's always more to the story.
So keeping in mind you have not seen the body camera footage yet, but what could we expect from the defense attorneys here as possible defenses?
Well, those defense attorneys are going chapter and verse with the what to say when you don't know what you're going to do about your case yet. You hear a lot of the standard language there. You've only heard one side of the story. Hold out and wait till you hear both sides. That's what I would be doing if I was sitting in their spot, which is they've got a really difficult, high-profile case with defendants who are not popular, and they know nothing about what's in discovery yet. All they know is they're about to get hit with a sledgehammer when that video gets released. So they're in a very unenviable position there, trying to come up with some initial defense, which really at this point could just be wait until all the facts come out.
Right, but one of the defense attorneys we heard at the top of the show said nobody intended for Tyre Nichols to die. Do prosecutors have to prove intent?
They don't have to prove specific intent to kill. Second-degree murder in Tennessee is actually a very concise statute. It basically says whoever kills with knowledge. And a knowing killing is one that occurs when you do something that is substantially likely that death will result. So you may hit somebody with a bottle and say, well, I was only intending to hurt them. But if they fall over and hit their head and they succumb to their injuries, then if you knew that hitting someone with a bottle, for example, is likely to cause death, you can be guilty of second-degree murder, at least in Tennessee, as that statute defines it.
Danny Savalas, thank you.
Turning now to Ukraine, where the country is dealing with the aftermath of yesterday's Russian air attacks. Ukrainian authorities say at least 11 people were killed across the country. The capital, Kyiv, also recorded its first war-related death of the year. NBC News foreign correspondent Richard Engel joins us now. So, Richard, yesterday's strikes came just a day after the U.S. and Germany announced they agreed to send their tanks to Ukraine. What's the situation like over there this morning? Especially, what are you hearing in and around the capital?
So there have been attacks once again in and around the capital, Kyiv, and that first death of the year. Kyiv is quite far from the front lines. Kyiv is a city that is experiencing power cuts, serious problems with running water, serious problems with heat, but there haven't been very many casualties because most of the Russian attacks have been against the infrastructure, against power plants, against treatment facilities that are generally on the outskirts of the city. So this is a more deliberate attempt by Russia to bring the fight right to the center, right to the capital. But it is not the only attacks. We are still seeing a very active front line all throughout the east, all throughout the south. And Ukrainians recognize that this is why they need the weapons. If they needed any more evidence, they just got it. They say we need weapons, we need air defenses, they need tanks, and some tanks are going to be on their way. And they are now asking for aircraft. So if you watch the progression here over the last year, and we're almost at the 1-year anniversary, first they started out asking for weapons. Then they started asking for air defenses. Then it was more advanced artillery, then tanks, and now they want fighter jets, F-16s.
Richard, explosions were also reportedly heard near the Russian-occupied Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. That's according to UN monitors there. What more can you tell us about what we're hearing about that?
So this goes back to an incident that happened yesterday. So there are many nuclear sites in Ukraine, the most famous of all being Chernobyl, which led to the Chernobyl nuclear meltdown. And it is extremely dangerous to have so many nuclear power plants, nuclear facilities in an active war zone. And the international community is so concerned about that the IAEA has sent monitors to these locations. But the IAEA, the monitors who are there, part of their mandate is just to record incidents, but not who was responsible. So if there is an explosion, they will write down and say, we heard explosions, our windows rattled, and that's what they reported yesterday. The Russians, the occupying Russian forces, control the Zaporizhzhia plant. And the Russians came out very angrily and condemned the IAEA, saying you shouldn't be making these allegations. You're making it look like the Russians aren't in full control of the facility. You're making it look like the Russians are acting irresponsibly. What the IAEA is asking for are safe zones, that these nuclear facilities, not just Zaporizhzhia, but all of them across the country, be declared war-free zones. But so far that hasn't happened, and there have been numerous strikes carried out very close to the facilities, and that's what we saw yet again overnight.
All right, Richard Engel, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We appreciate it. Time now for a look at your morning news now weather.
Bill Cairns is joining us. It's been a busy week. How are we looking for the weekend?
It has been a busy week. I was just thinking, this is the last weekend of January already. Like, I don't know how that happened. I mean, I was tracking, like, tornadoes and winter storms all month, it seems. And, yeah, here we are. And one thing we haven't been talking about a lot is big Arctic outbreaks. Remember back around Christmas, we had really cold temperatures throughout much of the country? We haven't had an Arctic outbreak since then. Well, now we're going to watch that changing as we go into February. Nothing dramatic, but it is going to get much colder. So we're going to set the stage this weekend. We do have a clipper system going through the Great Lakes. That just brings a little bit of light snow, and it also brings colder temperatures. And then behind it, we have another storm. Already winter storm warnings are up. We're going to get nailed in the mountains in the northern Rockies. And then watch this little narrow strip's going to extend out here into the plains. Areas like Sioux City, you're going to get a decent little snowfall out of this, but not much to your north and not much to your south either. Cedar Rapids will get some, and eventually this will head towards like areas like Chicago too, which will be nice. I think Chicago, it looks like the timing for your snow is going to be as we go through Saturday afternoon into Saturday evening, possibly around 1, maybe 2 inches of snow for you, but just enough out there on the roads to make things very slippery. So that'll be one issue that we'll be watching. And some of the other things, of course, we got some football games this weekend too. The game in Kansas City is going to be cold and chilly, maybe some snow showers, but the game in Philadelphia on Sunday, no problems whatsoever, increasing clouds, and it looks like a light wind. So for 2 outdoor games this time of year, you couldn't really ask for anything much better than that, guys. So yeah, the weekend forecast really shaping up really nice.
And Bill, I just realized next week is your favorite holiday.
That little rodent's going to pop up, and everyone's going to pay all attention. And I'm going to sit here saying whatever. Everyone's going to ignore me. But, yep, little rodent will get all the headlines.
Bill calls it Rodent Day, not Groundhog Day. Rodent Day.
Wow,
Unbelievable.
strong feelings.
Strong words from Bill. There's fighting words. All right, Bill, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.